Empathy to you if your relationship just ended. Any time of year for a relationship to end is really hard. And a number of us experience relationships ending around a holiday, an anniversary, a birthday, a special date. And when this happens, it makes grieving a bit more complicated. I'm Alan Robarge, an attachment-focused psychotherapist and a relationship educator, and I like to talk about how to heal attachment injuries and improve our relationships. This video is difficult. It's difficult to talk about relationships ending, and I imagine if you're watching this that you're in a difficult spot, emotionally overwhelmed, feeling the crushing grief, feeling heartbreak. Many of us, when we enter, especially the early period of it just happened, maybe the relationship just ended yesterday or today or just a couple days ago. It's so fresh. And what often comes up for us is why? We keep spinning in this why place. Or maybe you know why. I mean, many of us also, some history of attachment trauma, history of attachment wounds, and our dysfunctional relating, our unhealthy patterns of relating have been in this relationship for a rather long time. And we might even know, no, this relationship is not for us. This person is not for us. We need to end. It needs to end. And even though we know that, when it's actually ending or has ended, it's still painful. It still creates a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of dissonance and cognitive dissonance, this jarring confusion of it's not going well, it's not healthy, we've been on again, off again for many years, and yet I feel grief. I feel this, but why? Why can't we work out? Why can't we stay together? And so there's a lot of what we would say like looping mind, like you're just going through this reoccurring cycle of it's ended, I'm crushed by the grief, why does it need to end, I don't want it to end, let's imagine it not ending, and then we crash into reality again, no, it's ended, but why has it ended? And we just keep going through this incredible process. And your body, your nervous system, your attachment to stress just might be completely on fire. That excruciating feeling like you can't be in your skin, you cannot find a place of peace. And there's this heightened urgency. There's the adrenaline, the anxiety of the fear. And that also is confusing, again, if perhaps you are someone who knows your relationship needs to end, or you just don't think you're able to do another of the challenging chapters that you've had. And so there's that part of you that says, I think I want it to end, and this is not good for me, this is not good for us. And we have tried and tried and tried. And then simultaneously, the urgency, the anxiety, your nervous system is very activated. And what that activation is telling you, is driving you, this hormonal cocktail that you're being now flooded with, is all about get back together, get back together, get back together, get back together. And this is still disorienting and confusing and a lot of cognitive dissonance because we have this part of ourselves that says, no, it's over, let's not get back together. And then we have this other part of ourselves, both cognitively, our mind, our thoughts, but in our body as well, that unsettled feeling, that great urgency, that poking, prickly, prodding, pushing you, a lot of P's. I don't know why poking, prodding, pushing, a lot of P's here that is just saying, get back together. Come on, you've got to get back together. And for many of us, it's because that represents comfort. And it overrides a grounded reality or a grounded wisdom, the bigger picture, the bigger perspective, the bigger, this is not good for us, or all relationships end and it's time to end and it has run its course and it's over, and yet we cannot accept that. We cannot We just cannot accept that. And one of the greatest challenges or the obstacles to accepting that is our body is on fire with anxiety and urgency and adrenaline saying, don't end, don't end, don't end. We must get back together. We must get back together in order to be safe. I'm not safe. I'm not safe. I'm not safe unless we're connected, unless we get back together. This can drive you into great amounts of despair. This can drive you into an incredible amount of exhaustion. I mean, I'm tired in this moment, just trying to capture and explain the experience. And you might find that you wake up in the morning. Historically, I've called this the death headache, and it does link to the origin of my understanding of the death headache was when my father died, and just so happened to die on December 20th. It was a bit of a tragedy. It was an accident where he was hit by a train in his car. And December 20th, it was the end of school. When I found out it was before the holiday break, it happened to be a Friday. And I found out around, I think like around maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock on that evening. So holidays ever since then have been impacted by that anniversary date, the anniversary date of his death. Now, many, many years has passed. I at the time, I always forget, was I 13 or 14? I think I was 13. And I don't know, I have to do that. I always forget. I don't know. See, it was such a confusing time. I don't even really remember my age. I remember the year, but I always get confused about that. Because don't endings, and endings are death. There's an Anne Sexton poem that says, the end of the affair is always death. And there's another line in there where she says, and I broke the way a stone breaks. And visually I can see that, the beauty of a poet, of using economy of language, using language that pierces you. And I just picture, like a river rock, a stone no bigger than the palm of your hand. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but if a stone ever does break, it's just this complete clean break, and it just cracks in half. Now, of course, it doesn't happen a lot because of the strength of the stone, but doesn't that metaphor of the strength of your own sense of commitment or connection or attachment or bond or love with the other person, and even if you are aware that it cannot continue with the other person, just alone the upholding the connection, upholding the attachment to the relationship, and that it's solid, it is strong like a rock, the groundedness, the weight, the heaviness. And then, as Anne Sexton, that line says, and I broke the way a stone breaks. To me, I feel the weight and the heaviness of that. The end of the affair is always death. Grief challenges us, confronts us, shines a light on us, and says, you're not going to be the same. Life will not be the same. Routine, loving, interaction, getting out of bed, going throughout your day, interacting with other people, your purpose, meaning of life, your goals, what inspires you, where you find comfort, all of it changes. It changes. And I reference when my father died, I was so aware of my mind would not stop chattering, would not stop talking. And my mind kept saying, Dad's dead, Dad's dead, Dad is dead, Dad's dead. And it's because of that experience that at the time I knew how provocative and incredibly unsettling it was. I couldn't turn off my mind. I could not turn off that shocking piece of information and that voice that just kept pounding away. And sometimes it coincides with an anxiety in our chest and it feels like our heart is pounding. Sometimes it impacts and affects our diaphragm and that we get this very nauseous, floaty feeling and this vibration going through our abdominal area. And I can remember that this pounding, I called it the death headache. And ever since then, I have this knowing that for some of us, we cannot find any peace. And it's a bit of this is not good news, what I'm going to say. We generally can't just turn it off. And many of us learn how to live with it for a certain number of weeks, or quite honestly, those of us with attachment trauma and a history of endings. Endings mean death. The Anne Sexton poem, The End of the Fair, is always death. And that's why I liked it, because not only the metaphor and understanding that when things end, yes, we do change and go through transformation, and goodbye old life, hello new life, goodbye old self, hello new self. But for those of us with attachment trauma, this history, any ending can show up and register as pure abandonment and pure rejection. Our sense of self is intertwined with the other person, and the idea of the relationship ending means that not only does the relationship end, but our sense of self dissolves, implodes, and goes away. And if the person leaves and exits, they're exiting and leaving with some very core, important essence of our spirit, of who we are. And they take us with them, or we allow ourselves to be taken. It's as if we evaporate, we float away. We cannot see ourselves as a self in our own life. We only had a life before that was referenced with the other person. We become overly identified with the we, with the relationship. We define ourselves as our main, or what, if not our main, almost our main, or sometimes the main identifier of who we are and how we show up. We are a couple. We are a we. And this idea to lose that experience, we have lost, or we had never had fully developed a foundational, centered, grounded place of orienting to the world, regardless if we are or are not in a relationship. For all of these reasons, and what I'm going to say is not helpful in this moment because you're crushed and you're hurting and you're crying and you're upset. And we need to realize, those of us with a history of attachment injuries, attachment wounds, and sometimes shows up as symptoms of attachment trauma, that we must train ourselves very early on from this point forward. Relationships cannot be more important than knowing ourselves, than having an experience of ourself, having ego boundaries, ego strength, the ability to not enmesh, to not merge, to not live in a place where our life is better or more when the other person is in it. Now, that's a really challenging thing to say, because you can have moments of better. You can have moments of more. We're calling this transcendence. This is the transpersonal experience. Beyond the personal, we merge together, and it accesses, it opens up into this like bigger, glorious sense of connection in life through shared love. And who doesn't want that? And of course, some people don't, but many of us want it, and it's beautiful. But we have to be careful. Those of us with attachment injuries that are unhealed and unintegrated, we prioritize that transcendent, almost spiritual awakening through the bond, the connection, the attachment with the person that we care about. that takes precedence as being better than anything else in this world and in this life. And it's very easy to find romantic narratives and movies and song, pretty much every song has the word you in it. That, every song is singing to the other. You make me feel so, fill in the blank. It's because of you that life has meaning, and without you, I am going to be forever lost and crushed. And for those of us who don't have an ability to access or maintain a sense of self, a more solid, reliable sense of self that does not implode when a relationship ends, does not implode when a person we care about walks away or is no longer in our life. And this is why it's so scary and even dangerous for us to enter relationships and be in relationships where we prize the connection, we prize the romantic partnership, we prize marriage or a spouse as being so much better experience in life than our own life. And if you do this, if you have done this, and you know what it's like to then feel profoundly empty. If you don't have a sense of self, and if you lose your sense of self when a relationship ends, and if your whole worth and identity is intertwined and enmeshed, and a reflection of the relationship and a reflection of the other person, and if that other person is not in your life anymore, and that relationship is no longer mirroring back to you who you are, and in fact, you've lost now a big identifier, a big piece of who you are is ended, is over, is gone. And what's left is this emptiness, this very profound emptiness. Keep in mind, oftentimes this emptiness has different orientations. Sometimes it's very, very personal, like we feel like, I am empty. But there are concentric rings, or it seems to expand and move out in our awareness, and at some point it moves beyond the personal and it enters this much more expansive space of the universal, and that we're all fundamentally empty to begin with. Which that is a philosophical conversation that we could, talk about for hours. So I don't mean to challenge if it is or isn't true, or to take on that argument, but just to say that there is a part, if you internally start exploring this crushing emptiness, and it links to loneliness, it links to this great yearning, this great longing for connection. I need connection, I need connection, I need connection. Where did the other go? Where did the other go? Why can't we be together? And it's that inability to sit and stay in the emptiness, and it feels so personal, like we have been left, we have been abandoned, we have been rejected in this space. And we might know it through our neural pathways in our mind. How we get there is some history. Oftentimes, of course, many of us, childhood of, this empty place. Oh, this one again. I work so hard to avoid this. I work so hard to create obstacles to ever have to feel this. I live in denial of this emptiness. I'm looking, constantly searching for entertainment and distraction and addiction and other people and relationships just to grasp on, to create the buffer to ever feeling the intensity of this kind of emptiness, which might be grounded and rooted in a very personal wound, a very personal history of hurt, the abandonment, the rejection, and the betrayal, and the breaches in trust. And the point that I'm making is it moves beyond the personal, and then we enter this more existential place of emptiness as a human being. And if we just think of everyone right now sitting in a diner by themselves, holding a cup of coffee, staring out the window with this kind of frozen stare of emptiness, of life feels meaningless, of that moment where we say, I really do not know what I am doing. I really do not know who I am, and I really feel all alone here. And if we start noticing the flavor, the texture of these different types of emptiness, it can expand out into a very, very impersonal feeling. And to me, it transitions, the language moves from an emptiness, which almost, is very visceral, to what I would then call the void or the great wasteland. These places in our mind, you can find the void. You can find that place where you're just floating in nothingness and non-being, and you don't feel like you have a self, and you're just like, what is the meaning of all of this? And isn't that what endings do to us? And isn't that what grief does to us? It holds up a great mirror, this provocative, unfriendly mirror, this very harsh reality of a mirror, to just say, who are you? Who are you? What are you doing in this life? What have you been doing for the last so many years? And we can't look away. And sometimes when we look into that mirror, we see that emptiness. We don't really see ourselves reflected back. And there's that very, very painful feeling like, I do not know who I am. I do not know who I am. And I thought I knew. And I thought this relationship, I thought the life we created, I thought the routine we had, I thought the bond, the love, the connection, I thought that meant something more. I even started grasping on it, thinking it had a kind of permanence. It's reliable. Many of us, we like to tell ourselves it's permanent, till death do us part. You know, this will be our forever relationship. It's very dangerous. And again, let's not argue philosophically if it is or isn't true, all that business. I don't care about that. What I care about is the application of that idea in relation to those of us, to talk about myself, having attachment injuries. It just does not serve me. It's a bit almost delusional. It sets me up for great crushing grief and failure in relationships if I get drunk and I drop my guard and get drunk on this forever idea. And I do much better in managing my attachment wounds when I remind myself of impermanence, and that I need to vigilantly pay attention and stay present to being in relationship with my sense of self. Because those of us with attachment wounds have an ability to lose our sense of self in relationship. And isn't that almost a curse? Isn't that that's a real sophisticated form of suffering. You will love, you will attach, you will connect, you will feel a bond. And oh, by the way, when you do it, you are also going to start noticing yourself disappear. You're going to find it very hard to maintain and hold the differentiation between the internal sense of self and the connection with the other. We cannot hold that tension of the differentiation between the drive to be an individual and the drive to merge and become one. And many of us with these attachment wounds, we somehow, due to, mind, brain, history, attachment trauma, we kind of melt into the other person. Our internal scaffolding, our infrastructure falls apart, and we just become the relationship. Now, if that's all you have going for you, and the relationship has replaced your infrastructure of a self, and that's now the relationship is the main thing that gives you life and how you orient to know yourself and to interact with others. If that relationship itself ends and goes away, the amount of pain and incredible torture to experience, all of a sudden you are profoundly non-existent. And what I'm talking about is why many people around us who don't have this experience, they do not understand why grief and endings are outrageously painful, and they last way much longer than other people's endings, and we don't have resource, we don't have the capacity in a developmental sense to go through the grief as a chapter and begin to build a momentum and strength and move into grief chapter 2, and we're slightly starting to get stronger and better and orient to life, and then we move into the end of the relationship, the grieving process, chapter 3. For many of us, we don't have chapters. We stay at ground zero of feeling completely non-existent at this point. I do not know who I am without this relationship. And this is not a choice. This is not like, well, just change, just change my thinking. It's really very much interwoven with a lifetime of attachment trauma. It's interwoven. I'm sure what I'm going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if you can relate to this one. This is not the first time that you've been crushed by grief. Grief, we have a love relationship with grief itself. And for many of us, we've been in relationship much longer with grief and more profoundly and more intimately with grief than we have with anyone else in our life. Grief in and of itself is in a way a reflection of our own identity. I know myself through the grief. The Rumi poem, the grief for what you have lost lifts a mirror up to where you're bravely working. Expecting the worst, you look and see the face that you've been wanting to see. It's your face. Grief is the mirror. And many of us spend many years, many hours, many midnight moments, 2 a.m., can't sleep, 4 a.m., sitting in a dark living room in silence. And that mirror, that grief mirror, is there. I will say, and I don't know if this is your experience, and it's not true, of course, for everyone, but sometimes the grief is linked to a wisdom and is linked to a sadness that brings honest awareness. Grief can be expansive. We can feel the most profoundly alert and almost spiritually psychic, or so in tune with the natural order and rhythm of life. It's as if all the bullshit falls away, all of the extra, all of the wasted time, the silly things that, hi, how are you? Are you gonna go to the party? Oh yeah, I'll see you at the party. What are you wearing? These stupid conversations of nothing, talking about nothing. Oh, I just went to that new restaurant and, had that appetizer. Oh my gosh, how was it? Who cares, This stupid things of life. There's almost a craziness. It is very, very insane is what I mean. It's very insane to have the urgency and to be alive and on fire, and that your suffering wakes you up, and you're really on the edge of existence. And then to think about the things that we usually talk about and how we fill our days with nothing, distraction, entertainment, watching TikTok videos, mindless chit-chat. We spend so much of our time checked out. Life, the intensity of consciousness, the living on the edge of existence is not pretty. And that's what grief does to us. It says all of these distractions, all of these ways that you've constantly put blinders on, that you've ignored reality, that you've numbed out, you've dissociated, you've lived as a robot, you've lived on autopilot. All of these behaviors, all of these mindlessness practices fall apart and no longer work, and we're left with a intensity of pure mindfulness. Again, that mirror, Rumi's mirror, the grief for what you have lost lifts a mirror up to where you're bravely working. And bravely is the key word here, because many of us, we don't feel brave at all. We're like, no, please, I gotta get out of this place. And that's, some of us shut down. Some of us, you might experience, you lose your mind. That's okay too. It happens. You might lose your mind. Some of us really decompensate here and disappear, dissociate. It's just too much. It's too much to sit on the edge of existence and see that you have no sense of self, and to not be able to discern the difference between personal emptiness and the existential emptiness of being consumed by the great void. And in this place, it's like so many other people have no idea what you're experiencing. It's true, many people just don't get it. And there's that natural sense of the brain, the mind wants to latch on to the person you were in relationship with, and you just want their understanding, their compassion, their intimacy. If they would just really if they could join you in this place of deep, deep hurt, of deep, deep crushing grief, and just know how much pain you're in, why wouldn't they help? Why wouldn't they want to be in a relationship? To see the purity of this degree of suffering, the purity of how suffering often illuminates a sense of innocence. The humility of just how exposed and innocent that we are in this life, and that it is such a tragedy to have love end. It's a tragedy to have a connection end. It's a tragedy, even as normal as it is. Already my earlier point, impermanence. This is normal, relationships end. This is normal, relationships end. This is normal, relationships end. And no matter, even though that is something we must hold true to and pay attention to, when it does end, what you perhaps are experiencing right now, it's like this great injustice. How could I be denied relationship? How could I be denied a continuation of something that's so beautiful and wonderful and nice? And then our brain, all the stuff starts flooding in. But wait a minute, it wasn't all beautiful and nice. It ended for a reason. There's a lot of tension, a lot of challenge, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of on again, off again. You might have even in the relationship lost yourself before the relationship ended. For me, in this example, I really like the phrase, like, I lost my spirit. The spirit of me is gone. And that's one reason why many of us want it to end. And you might find that you were completely unable to end it, even though you knew it wasn't good for you, it was unhealthy, it was dysfunctional, it really wasn't what you wanted, you felt you deserved more. And one reason you were unable to end it because you had no self to end. We need a self with agency. The self propels us. The self is the vehicle that allows us to make a choice. And if you have no self to move yourself forward, or to move itself forward, the self cannot make a decision and a choice to end. And that's one reason why some of us just sit here in a rather codependent, passive, helpless place. I want it to end, but I have no ability to end. Because it's death. The end of the affair is always death. If this is happening simultaneously at a holiday, we enter holidays generally with a there's this pressure to be cheery and happy. And sometimes if the routine changes, we're holding this house of cards, we're holding this very precarious, tension-filled relationship together through the routine of everyday life. And we can stay, we can hold, we're hanging on by a thread. And sometimes during a holiday time, when the routine shifts and there's more stressors, and there's also a routine shift means it can create a bit more of a spaciousness and just that little bit of extra room around not going to work for 3 or 4 days, or having in-laws come stay with you, or the pressure of now we're buying gifts and we're making plans to go to dinner and needing to perform. Holidays often have a performative aspect to it. And many of us in stale relationships, stuck relationships that are must end, not going well, we're also performing at relationship. We're performing at being a partner, and maybe we're with someone also that they're performing. And when we just add that additional challenge of, well, let's also perform in public, let's perform in front of our family, let's perform. And the performance we're giving is that we're closer than we really are. The performance that we're giving is that we are able to let in bits for connection. We're able to let in intimacy and connection and vulnerability. And it really, again, that mirror, even before it ends, the grief's mirror is there. And it just illuminates it. It shines this incredibly strong light on how, and forgive me for this word, it's a word that I like. I don't know if it resonates with you, but man, we are fake. The performance of relationship. It's the pretending. The word pretending and fake. And many times we have to really disconnect internally from ourselves, and oftentimes what we're disconnecting from is the ongoing pain, the ongoing hurt. And we're just constantly trying to rationalize, justify, make sense of, downplay, really limit letting in the magnitude of all the hurt that we carry. And sometimes during holidays or birthdays or anniversary dates, I've had a number of clients, they go out to dinner on their anniversary and they have a lovely, wonderful, performative, they play the part, they show up as a loving couple going out to dinner on their anniversary, and 2 or 3 days later, 2 or 3 weeks later, it culminates, they can't hold it together anymore and the relationship ends. One of them initiates it, or they both just look at each other and say, who are we kidding? Man, I just can't continue playing this game where we're pretending we're getting our attachment needs met and we're not getting our attachment needs met. Many of us need heartbreak triage. We really need to think in terms of what I call back to basics. Rest, some routine, reach out to others, don't isolate, vitamins, eat green things, go for light walks. And I know that sounds basic, but that's what I mean by back to basics. Some of us can't get out of bed and take a shower. And so that's what's on the list. Back to basics means, can you please get in the shower for 5 minutes? It's okay to lay in bed for an extended period of time. It's okay to not be able to move off of the couch for an extended period of time. And why is that okay? Because that's what we do when we grieve. That's a reality. But we also need to try with our heartbreak triage to give ourselves a little bit of nourishment, a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of movement, a little bit of support, a little bit of care. So we're doing our best to try to manage the immovability and that profound stuckness that comes with grief, simultaneously saying, I need to muster up enough energy to at least make myself a sandwich. Or I need to I think I do need to, I haven't had a glass of water in 6 hours. I really think I need to get water. Now, maybe this isn't you. Maybe this degree, this level of back to basics isn't where you're at. But I'm sure many of you watching this can relate, where you just feel completely directionless and you feel hopeless, helpless. You have no agency. The thought of getting up and getting a glass of water feels so profoundly ridiculous. Like, why? And I just don't care. I just don't care. I don't care about anything. Something else to think about, and perhaps we could call this as part of the heartbreak triage. If you are in a period of the holidays, if there is some kind of celebrations going on, that potentially is going to be very, very annoying. It's going to be very, very tiring. And some people live in families where you don't have a choice. You have to put on the mask and you have to go through the motions. You might have children. You want to show up and play the part of going through the holiday time and take a break from the intensity of your paralyzing grief in order so that the kids can have their holiday experience. But it takes an incredible amount of energy to play that part and put on the mask. So what I like to do in this time, I call it plan A, plan B, plan C, and all of those plans, and you could have a plan D of as many plans as you need, but these plans are very well thought out, very specific things that you need or you potentially could do in the event that you get overwhelmed. So for example, let's imagine, hopefully this might not be true of everybody, but let's say you have one family member you can rely on to help watch the kids, and you all get together for some family gathering, and you are flooded and overwhelmed by the wave. Grief comes in waves. It's this ocean wave, the tide pulls you out into the ocean of loss and the ocean of sadness, and you're grieving, and you cannot function for the next 20 minutes. So plan A is you tell someone in advance, hey, you know what? I might just totally melt down and be unable to function. And I want us to have a signal for when I need to exit and go for a walk around the block for 25 minutes. And I need you to watch the kids. Let's say that's plan A. Plan B, this is slightly a joke. It's not a joke, but over the years with clients, this has been the kind of go-to, and it's kind of silly. So that's why it turns into a joke. And then I also use a lot of humor in my work with clients, because I always say grieving is hilarious. That's the sarcastic, suffering is hilarious and grieving is sexy. That's the phrase. And we laugh. We try to bring levity to that. But the other plan B is we need more ice. So if you're in a situation and you got to escape for 20 minutes, it's like, hey, I'm going to run to the store. I think we need more ice. I don't know if this is too ridiculous or silly for you. The point that I'm making is that if you can think in advance, how can you break up the obligation and the experience of trying to show up in life as normal when life is not normal, and you're trying to go through the motions of pretending that you're participating in holiday, be it a birthday, be it times or any other time of year when there's this gathering of family. And if you just lost someone you care about and the relationship is ended, you're bringing your grief to that gathering. And so this idea of plan A, plan B, plan C is just make some plans in advance of how you can compartmentalize your time and your appearances, where you can disappear and get some privacy, some moments of needing to fall apart. Which leads me to also a kind of, I've used this, what I'm going to share, this is it's just a kind of mantra in a way, and to me it affirms the reality that I'm experiencing. And you don't have to follow it in these words. You can create your own, use words that resonate with you. But for me, it's grieve, cry, throw things, scream, fall apart, exhale, and give up. And then I take a breath, and that's almost like a prayer. That's just, it's affirming my experience that this is what's going on for me. Grieve, cry, throw things, scream, fall apart, exhale, and give up. Grieve, cry, throw things, scream, fall apart, exhale, and give up. Grieve, cry, throw things, scream, fall apart, exhale, and give up. Empathy to you. Very, very painful stuff. I'm sorry that this is happening. Don't isolate. Sometimes we need to sit by ourselves and look at the existential mirror of our non-self and freak out. And other times we need to text a friend and say, meet me at this coffee shop. I really need your support. And sometimes I know some people live in isolated places, or some people will respond back and say, well, I don't really have a friend. I don't have that friend. Well, that then really is your challenge. It's really part of what grief is calling you, is a way to start reaching out to some new people. And I know it's hard. Many of us don't want to reveal ourselves or meet new people, but you'd be surprised if you go out into the world and you take a little bit of a risk to just strike up a conversation. And they might not be a lifelong friend, might not be a very, very deep friend because you just met. But the point I'm trying to make here is part of the heartbreak triage and the back to basics is to have a plan to not isolate. And that ultimately, and this one's really, really hard, we need to start to strengthen the skill of taking some breaks from our grief. Now that one's really hard, and you have a death headache and your body's on fire and there's this intensity and urgency and adrenaline pulsing through your bloodstream. But we do our best to say, I'm gonna go for a walk for 20 minutes and I'm gonna think about something else. And you very, very specifically identify what is that thing that you're gonna think about. For me, it's other relationships that are reliable, and it's really trying to accentuate the love that I feel in a different relationship, since I'm so overly focused on the absence of losing the love of the relationship that has just ended. Take care of yourself. This particular video is part of a grief series and heartbreak series and relationships ending series. So more videos to come. Please do all of the things. What this means is you've heard this 800 times. Click like, hit subscribe, and leave a comment. I put a lot of effort and personal alignment, that I'm not just sharing kind of empty ideas off of a bullet pointed list. I'm trying to live the experience through the video of trying to follow the layers of these insights so that it actually speaks to you and is coming from a meaningful place. That means that it does take a lot of energy to pull this together and make the video, and there is an intention that it gives you value and benefit. If it gives you value and benefit, please share the video with others, spread the words, take the link and put it on some other social media site, and or just simply leave a comment and talk about how you receive this video. The more that you do that also helps circulate the videos and promotes, aligns with my intentions of making sure that we talk about grief and relationships ending and attachment trauma. Thank you so much.